Testing, testing. Oh, lovely. Why is this so strange? Rachel has arrived. There we go.
Maybe we'll see. Nope, I'm gonna have to back out. I'm gonna have to back out and reset because stupid freaking headset is not doing what it's supposed to do. I hate technology with such a passion.
That's okay. I'm still testing my sound and stuff as well because there's an echo from my own sound back. So, how are you keeping, guys? How's everybody in the comment section? Go live. Go live on Instagram. Can everybody hear myself anyway, at least? My sound was a bit funny to start with. Rachel's just popping in and out to get her sound up and going. Dun, dun, dun. Do you like my new t-shirt, guys? On the, what was it called? The Holy Grenade of Antioch. Technology? Yeah, technology's a funny one, alright. Twitchy witchy. Twitchy witchy 95. Oh, she's back again. Hopefully now the sound is working this time.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Can you hear me? Can you actually hear me? Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Okay.
That's the main thing. 1 second. Oh, I'm the big one now.
Who's a big boy? You're a big boy.
That's much better now.
Are those tea leaves still good for
you? Yes, they are. Okay, good morning, everyone. Well, in honor of today's discussion, I'm wearing a green dress. We're going to be discussing Greenland because Greenland has been very much in the news lately, and it is a relevant topic to medieval history as well. And I think the impact of Greenland on Europe in general is going to surprise some people, especially European art, medieval art in Europe. And I think there's a lot of people. I mean, I was actually surprised when I started digging into it a little more deeply.
Wait, what?
Yeah, right. See, I'm surprising Philip. I am surprising Philip already.
What? I'm like, is this something I was supposed to know about?
No. I mean, if we all know exactly the same things, then what kind of conversation can there actually be? So, yeah.
Yes, that's the t-shirt I have today. I haven't showed Rachel yet because Rachel had to pop in and out. Have you seen my t-shirt, the Holy Grenade of Antioch?
Oh, nice.
Nice. Holy Grenade of Antioch.
I love the Monty Python reference. You know, a lot of people have been asking me, what I think of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and it is just like the Life of Brian. It's just brilliant.
Yes,
right?
I love it so much.
It is, and people especially in regard to my recent complaints about costume production values in medieval movies, people invariably say, well, what do you think about Monty Python and the Holy Grail? Well, it's not even pretending to be a historical movie, but despite that, the armor is more accurate than most armor you see in any Hollywood production these days. Or any armor you see in Hollywood productions these days, despite being a satire and a spoof and purposefully attempting to take the mickey out of politics and history and people's misconceptions of the Middle Ages, right? It still has more accurate, in some cases, more accurate shapes of clothing, although they purposefully, once again, choose to make everything brown and dirty because they make fun of that. Yes. They're making fun of the misconception that the Middle Ages is dirty and everyone is covered in feces, right?
Yeah.
You remember when the serfs are digging in the mud, or well, the former serfs, I guess, because they've liberated themselves and are part of the commune. King Arthur comes along and after he leaves, they say he must be the king. He's the only one not covered in shit.
Yes.
Right.
I love that reference. And it was the same thing. Another movie that made the exact same point as well is the movie from 1993, Robin Hood, Men in Tights. The director actually said the same thing as
Yep.
well about medieval movies, that they're actually getting worse. And
Yep.
what's crazy is the point of that movie was to start to brighten up medieval movies again, because he when he was being interviewed again and again and again, he was always enraged. He hated the fact that these movies were getting darker and darker and darker. And
Darker
in
and
fact, he's
darker.
got this like notorious scene, because he was Jewish himself, where he'd be like, "Look, we will give you the money for these movies. Like, what's going on that these movies are getting darker?" Because he has a scene where a Jewish man comes into it, and he's basically giving the wink wink, "Look, we will give you the money for these movies. What's going on here?" And then what was it called? If he had just seen the movies now, because the newest Robin Hood, and this is the irony of it, is the new Robin Hood that's coming out, and we were bitching about this before. It's
Yeah.
the darkest movie I've ever seen yet. Oh my god! And it's gotten so bad now. There's not even trees in Robin Hood anymore. Like, what was it called? The north of England, which is famous for its trees, especially the region where Robin Hood is at, has no trees anymore. Like,
No
what
trees
the hell? It has to
anymore.
be that bleak now, do you know? It's big, bleak surface that
I know, it's the
makes causes
moors.
locals
He's
to
out on the
disappear.
moors, right? The
Yeah.
depressing, dark moors, haunted by ghosts and the ghosts of his past. And yeah,
Oh,
it's
stop. And
we can't even have Robin Hood with trees anymore. Not only does
yes,
he not have green clothes, he
yes,
has
I was about to
he
say that.
he's dressed in furs from some wolf he must have wrestled, I guess.
Oh, stop. Wrestling Vikings as well. I seen one of the bits of the trailer. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I seen one bits of the trailer where he's wrestling a Viking, and I'm like, why is he wrestling a Viking dressed as a bear? Like, what the hell is going on in this movie?
Why
Like,
is there a Viking with Robin Hood at all? Like
yes.
that era's done.
Oh,
We've moved on.
stop. Oh my
Oh my
god,
god.
it's so bad. Twitchy, you're from Nottingham? No way. Or are you originating from Nottingham? I'd be offended too as well if I originate from Nottingham, which is famous for its trees. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Because don't get me wrong, I understand what the message is trying to say. You know, this is the dying Robin Hood, but I
Right.
always thought that was communicated, especially in the art, with the trees being stripped down and it being the
Right.
middle of winter. I thought that's
Leafless trees is the symbol of death,
yes,
right? But
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's also symbolically the symbol of life to come, because the cycle of the deciduous tree, right? It
yeah.
dies, but then it's reborn in the spring. So, it instead they're like, no chance of rebirth because there's no trees. Just no
Mm,
trees. No trees at all. Yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm very not excited about the new Robin Hood movie. And I love Hugh Jackman. Let me tell
Mm,
you. I love Hugh Jackman.
yeah.
I'll watch anything with Hugh Jackman generally, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to even sit through this movie, because
Mm.
I'm just going to be completely distracted by, everything. I,
Yeah. Oh my God. I seen the trailer. I did not like the look of the movie at all. And as you said there, I looked at some of the actors in there, and there's some real promising actors in there. But
yeah,
I can't watch 2 to 3 hour movie where it's just bleak and depressing for the whole thing because it wants to express the fact that Robin Hood is dying. Yeah, but he does
yeah,
lots of other things as well. Like, what
right.
I love about a regular Robin Hood movie is it's meant to have its ups and downs. And because this
Yeah,
movie is meant to be the death of Robin Hood, we're expecting, him to be in the bed at the very end, shooting his arrow outside of the window, and then he dies. That's kind of what we're expecting. But the whole movie doesn't have to be him like going around going, "Oh, I haven't accomplished nothing in my life." Like, come on,
right.
like, do you know?
Right. I mean, the other thing is the way what I've seen from the movie, I don't know if he's going to get a bed or a chamber or an
Yeah,
indoor a building.
exactly.
Like, I don't even know if he gets a building of
Yeah,
any kind. It's
yeah.
so bad. It's just so bad.
Oh,
I
stop.
someone commented on my why medieval movies suck short. Someone commented just this morning. Actually, they said the movies are so dark because they want to cover up their low production values for sets. Right? They don't want you to see just how garbage the sets are.
Oh,
because if there's actually light, then you could see that they've not put any effort to make this look like a medieval place at all. And I thought,
oh,
oh,
for
good
sure.
point, good point.
Uh,
But that would also, but Philip, that would require that they have actual sets. Most historic movies now have CGI everything,
oh,
right?
Jesus.
It's
Yeah.
CGI castle, CGI cathedral, CGI village, and it looks like it's animated. It doesn't look
Yeah.
real. You can tell,
Yeah.
you can see with your eyes that that is not a real place. And I'm done with CGIs. I am so done with CGIs.
Oh,
I want
yeah.
real special effects. I want costumes. I want makeup. I want things that blow up to actually blow up. Thank you very much. I want, it doesn't have to be, you can blow up a model and make it look really great. I
Mm,
just watched, I just watched the first Alien movie from the
yeah.
70s,
Mm,
and
mm.
it was amazing. It is a masterpiece. Ridley Scott, chef's kiss, masterpiece of
Yeah.
cinematography. Everything looks real. They're using miniature models of spaceships and space stations, and it still looks real because it is real. It's a real thing. They just film it in such a way that it looks full sized. Right? That
Mm.
looks way better than the CGI bullshit they keep throwing at us these days. I'm done with CGIs. Done. It's lazy,
Yes.
it's cheap, and it looks fake.
Yeah, but you bring up an exceptionally good point. Is Ridley Scott? Ridley Scott's last movie, The Last Duel. Oh my God, the background wasn't as nearly as gorgeous as the movies he
Mm-mm.
was making back in the 90s. That were
Yeah,
also medieval movies.
yeah,
If you compared to Ridley Scott's peak brilliance, which
yeah,
was the likes of Gladiator and stuff, oh no
yeah,
way! Like, what the
yeah.
hell has happened to Ridley Scott in the last 20 years? You know?
Yeah. I think it's just like he's trying to follow what he sees as the trends of what the audience wants.
Hmm.
But I don't think this is actually what audiences want.
Yeah.
I'm I would like to go back to movies that have storylines
Hmm.
and plot that progresses reasonably and character development, and not 20 minutes of an action scene that does nothing for the actual story advancement, right? Like
Oh,
I'm done. I don't want to see people flying around in CGI vomit anymore. Thank you very much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible. And the comment
Yeah.
section, I fully agree with all the comment section as well.
Yeah.
Nottingham is an exceptionally beautiful place
It
as well.
is. It's
And it is
beautiful.
a huge shame that they're not highlighting how romantic Nottingham is, even more
Yep.
so from what was it called? A tourist perspective, where we actually rely on getting the money at the end of this, to try to
Yeah.
encourage people to come to England, to come to Nottingham, to see these wonderful places. And if they don't even have the room or space, or even, the tax, to be able to produce the money in Nottingham, Ireland is next door. Once
Right.
again, Wicklow has done endless amount of movies and TV shows in the last 30 years. Most famously, the television show Vikings, Game of Thrones. So
Right.
many movies have been produced and TV shows have been produced lately up
Yep.
around that whole entire area, especially Wicklow, which is endless amount of hills and trees
Yep.
where you can have very low tax as well. So there's absolutely no excuse not to be doing a Robin Hood up around the Wicklow hills. It's
I mean,
crazy.
even with a little creativity. So then there's the cost of moving all your sets and your equipment to another country if your studio isn't set up there. Okay, I guarantee you that within the United States of America, there are plenty of places where they could get an equivalent look,
Mm.
right? I mean, it's ridiculous. Do you know how many robber barons at the end of the 19th century bought entire castles and manor houses and shipped them over in pieces to the United States? A
No
lot.
way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yes,
I
they
did not
did.
know about
Welcome,
this.
welcome to being a rich fucker at the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
Where I lived in Washington State near Tacoma, there's
Mm.
an early 16th century English manor house,
Yeah.
not a reconstruction, the manor house.
Mm.
I think that was Weyerhäuser, Weyhauser. I don't know how they pronounce it in English because I'm a German speaker. But there was this logging magnate in the Pacific Northwest, and he paid to have this thing shipped from
Jesus.
England
Yeah.
to Seattle. Basically, it's now a wedding venue. You can rent it for $10,000 a weekend, for
Yeah.
instance.
But another place I'd love to bitch about as well is just north of New York as well. Do you remember where your man got his head decapitated? Where was
Wait,
it? Sleepy
which
Hollow.
one?
That's it. Sleepy Hollow. Up
Oh,
around the Sleepy Hollow area. My American geography is
yes.
terrible.
Yeah, that's okay. Yes, yeah,
Sleepy
yes, in the
Hollow would
Catskills,
make it.
in the
Yeah,
Catskills, yeah, up in
yeah.
the Catskills. Yep, yep, 100%. There's no excuse for CGI. I'm sorry. With a little
Mm,
creativity, a lot can be done with very little. So
mm,
yeah, yeah. But even Eastern Europe, there's plenty of inexpensive filming sites. God knows there's castles galore in Romania. They've got some
mm.
really wonderfully preserved medieval castles in Romania.
Yeah, yeah.
So, there's just and God knows the cost of production. I bet it doesn't cost very much to film in Romania.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Because these days they're making a fortune, especially the way tax and everything is up
Yep,
around Hungary and Romania, as you said
yep,
there. The only
yep.
terrifying thing about Romania is that you have to have now. It's not that much of a threat, but you have to have what was it called? Bear rangers out to prevent bear attacks up around Romania. Because
Right.
anytime people have gone off by themselves to go filming, without a ranger about. They've been attacked by bears because they don't know, where to go in Romania, and then on top of that as well, what to do and what not to do. So they just it's not just people going off filming as well. It's people, like myself, slightly ignorant about Romania, are like, oh. Yuki, there's a fancy castle over there. Let's walk off to this castle. And then suddenly they get attacked by a bear and taken off. That's
Right.
the only thing I'd be wary about. But as long as you have, hire a bunch of rangers to go and look after you, you should be completely fine.
Yeah, you should be fine. And hell, in Romania, they use the Roman alphabet, so you don't even have to learn Cyrillic, right? Unlike Bulgaria, where you'd have to learn Cyrillic.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I'm done with these movies having terrible production values, CGIs, bad costumes, terrible lighting. Yeah,
Mm,
get back to me when they start actually producing a movie that looks pretty again. Thank you.
yeah.
Kevin
Kevin,
Kevin says, "Can we see your comments?" I can see that comment. Did I miss? Let me see. Did I miss? We need a blackmail ring to make the greatest Irish movie of all time. A
oh,
blackmail ring? Am I
one second.
missing?
I think I've gotten all of his comments so far. It's just the only thing, Kevin, as well, is that there's tons of other comments as well. So just be wary of that one because sometimes I'm clicking on Susan's comment, and sometimes
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
just like going between the two of them. So if I missed your comment, I do apologize for that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
Villa Vendetta makes a point. She says, France has dozens of castles. A lot
yeah,
are abandoned. They can be bought for cheap. A studio could literally build, in a castle. So you know what they do in Korea, and this is something I don't understand why more movie studios haven't done this. So in Korea, they do all these period dramas,
yeah,
but because of the Korean War, there isn't much, and the Japanese, there isn't much left of historical Korean architecture. So the studios, all the major Korean studios, built historical Korean villages and castles, palaces, and fortresses as their filming studio so that they would have these sets already there. So
mm,
they don't even need to go anywhere or pay anyone to film on site. They built it for themselves.
yeah.
Like, oh, that's very smart. I wonder what about our own studios, huh?
Mm. But it's not just that, because it's the same thing over in
Oh
Italy as
yeah,
well,
Hearst.
where they're pretty much giving away castles in Italy, and it's the same thing
Yeah,
in
and
Ireland as
villages.
well. Yeah,
Yeah,
villages as
castles
well.
and villages.
Yeah, and it's the same thing in Ireland as well, where farmers are trying to give away castles because they don't have money to look after these castles. There's quite literally,
Yeah,
I'm not joking about this, ruins that they cannot look after. If you go
yep,
up to a farmer and say, "Hey, look, I have the money to rebuild that," they'll be like, "Yeah, take it away." Like it's not going to take much. And this is what I love about Ireland. It is so easy to approach a farmer and say, "Hey, look, I need to do A, B, and C. How about I give you, a little bit of money?" Like, yeah, 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 you work away. You do whatever you want. It really does not take much to
yeah,
convince a farmer to do anything in Ireland and even try to
yeah,
buy up the land he cannot use and has a
yep,
big annoying cat in his view. Now, I love castles. And I know most of the comment section love castles, but to a farmer, this is land, this is dead land that's in his
Yeah.
way that he cannot use. He'll do
Can't
anything
do
to get rid of
anything with it.
it. Yeah,
Yep. And of course all the stones that they encounter from previous architecture when they're plowing their fields are
yeah.
just annoying, right? They're also just in their way. So yeah, there's options. CGI is not the way. It just isn't. Back away,
Yeah.
my friends. Okay, well, I think we have. I can't tell because this is technically you're the one who set up this stream. So for all I know, we have 0 people watching. If it weren't for the
Oh,
comment section,
yeah.
are we at the point that we're ready to get started on our actual topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys have been living under a rock, which I know some of my comment section is, no offense, guys, including
on
myself.
on purpose.
Yeah, actually. It
rock,
explains
rock,
why I'm so
rock,
terrible at
rock,
this.
rock dwelling for the win.
Mm, for sure. But unless you've been living under a rock, believe it or not, this week, oh my God, it's been wild. I'm not going to go too much into all the modern stuff that's been going on, other
Yeah,
than the
we don't
fact
want to
that
go there.
yeah, there's a little bit of an argument between the president of the United States and a few leaders in Europe, well, a lot of people, to do with Greenland right now. And because of that, surprisingly, very surprising to myself, there's been a lot of YouTube historians, of course, getting ready to jump on the bandwagon so they can get as many algorithm points as possible talking about Greenland,
Yep.
triggering the algorithm. And to my surprise, there's a lot of academics jumping on that as well, the old bandwagon, which is the origins of Greenland. Who
Yep.
got to Greenland first? Who owns Greenland? Wink, wink,
Yeah.
wink, wink.
Yeah.
And I was very, very surprised to see many academics, like high-level academics, jumping on that bandwagon and saying, "Well, technically speaking, these people were the first to be on the island of Greenland before everybody else." And I always find it very funny, and maybe you'll notice this as well, Rachel, or you probably already have, is that they leave out other information. And I'm like, hey,
Right.
wait, 1 minute now. I understand the
Yep.
first few academics who were quickly rushing in to say, oh, well, Greenland was first colonized by the Vikings, or Greenland was first colonized in 3200 BC by the Native Americans.
Right.
I can understand people rushing in and saying that and then leaving out tons of information in
Lots
between.
of information. Like for instance, but
Mm,
none of those were contiguous settlements
yes.
or inhabitations, right?
Mm.
It's like Greenland has a habit of chewing people up and spitting them out, it seems like.
Yeah, weird enough. I don't know why that is, you
I
know.
don't know why that is. Why could it be, Philip? It's such a
Yeah,
beautiful place. So
yeah,
habitable, so
yeah.
hospitable.
And it's also so easy just, to move in there and just quickly take, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because people, of the past did it. So clearly I, as a human being, can do it as well.
Yep.
That was a
Yep.
comment made by, was it Gone Medieval? That was like, well, my ancestors could do it. I can do it as well. And then
Yep.
having a little bit of problems trying to take over Greenland. It's not like in the modern what was it, 30 years, we haven't turned around to our ancestors of the past and tried to occupy other territories, hint, hint,
Yep.
the Middle East, and failed to do so. But regardless, now we're going to try to move into Greenland. But I'll go back into the main conversation itself again.
Yep.
Regardless, I was very surprised to see a lot of academics jumping on the bandwagon in the last 2 weeks, especially in the last 12 hours, where they're still leaving out key information for a part of their bigger argument to convince
Yep.
the public to believe in their interpretation. So it was very surprising to see a lot of academics do that. Even worse than when it was the Ukrainian, when all the
Oh
conflicts kicked
God.
off in
Oh
Ukraine.
my God. All the people arguing, oh, just let Ukraine go back to Russia. It should be part of Russia. Like, oh God. Oh my God. Yeah, it's I think I I think a lot of people see, I think a lot of especially Americans probably are not aware that there was even a medieval European settlement in Greenland. I think
Mm,
I think more Americans are aware that there were Vikings in Canada, Newfoundland, now what they call Vinland, than are aware that there was actually Europeans in the Middle Ages in Greenland. And what a lot of and even the ones who know about the Greenland settlement don't necessarily or don't realize that it died. I mean, vanished. It
Mm,
ceased to be occupied in the
mm,
15th century. So there's it falls in with the whole narrative of humans arrive, they settle, they try to do their thing, and either they die out or they leave again.
mm.
Next group comes, they do their thing, they either leave or they die out again. There's no contiguous there is no contiguous occupation until the Middle Ages, and it's yeah it's an interesting thing how everyone seems to want something to do in Greenland. It's always a question of the resources. What does Greenland have to offer
Yes.
people, right? It's
Mm.
always the resources. So do you know what the major resource that the Europeans wanted in Greenland in the Middle Ages? Why they went there? Why
Well,
they
Well, when I was looking into Greenland in the last, no, I have to highlight the fact before I get into this because myself and Rachel, we are arguing against academics here. So if you guys suddenly pull out a whole load of information there, just be advised we are not specialists in academics in any of this. We understand that we are kind of pushing against other academics who have spent way longer researching into this than we have. So we have to, completely make people aware of this before we start. But from the research I have been doing in the last 24 hours or so, it was ivory, from what I was reading, was the main
yeah
resource that was coming out of Greenland at the time
yeah
from seals, which
yeah
is
no
something that's,
walruses
yeah.
seals don't
Oh,
have
sorry. Oh,
ivory.
yeah,
Seals
yeah,
have no
yeah, yeah.
ivory, Philip.
Oh, no.
They have bones, but they have no ivory, as it were. Yeah,
No.
it's the walrus tusks.
Mm.
And you know what was fascinating? Now I didn't know this until I started digging into it. Do you know how they shipped the walrus tusks to Europe?
Sorry, say 1 minute.
Do you know how they shipped the walrus tusks to Europe?
Actually, I don't.
Yeah, so they actually left them attached to the skull because
Mm.
it protected them and it kept everything safe and together. And then when they arrived in Europe, the ivory workers would actually basically process it, detaching the tusks from the skulls. But what this means is they had these walrus skulls and they would use them to make other kinds of bone carvings. So we actually have medieval walrus skulls kind of all over Europe because of that, because of how they shipped them
Yeah.
from walrus from Greenland. And they've actually started doing genetic testing of the walrus ivory,
Mm.
that out of which all of these amazing medieval ivory carvings are made. And they can actually tell that there was a shift in the places from which the Greenlanders were hunting the walrus, and that
Mm.
they actually, as the Middle Ages progressed, they started having to go further and further north
Yeah.
to get the test, which tells which people, scientists observing this suggest this means that they were probably overhunting, and the walruses were probably retreating from the hunting because the walruses aren't dumb.
Mm.
Walruses realize if we live here, they come for us and they take us. So the walrus settlements were moving further and further north. So the Greenlanders had to go further and further north, further and further into other territory occupied by the Thule people,
Yeah.
and also into waters that had major ice flows.
Mm, 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 mm.
But they can actually, as the Middle Ages wears on, the ivory that's being used, this walrus ivory, is coming from further into the Arctic Circle, basically. And I
Yeah.
thought that was really fascinating that they could use the DNA that they find in the ivory, in the skulls especially, to be able to track that shift. Because
Mm.
that's that kind of, what is the big mystery around the Greenland settlement, the medieval Greenland settlement? What's the big mystery, Philip?
Oh, why
What's the
they
put
all disappeared?
why it disappeared, right? That's and Philip, from what you've read, is there a single answer that seems to be a correct one?
Oh my god. Okay, this is why. This is why I had to highlight the fact that I am not an academic. I didn't realize how much of an argument this was until the
Yep.
past 24 hours, right?
Ah,
So,
ah,
what happened was that there was a huge political argument that kicked off with the origins of Greenland.
yeah.
And then on the right flank, all these random academics started to appear all over these forums and Reddit posts and everything. And they started arguing about, but what's more important is how they all disappeared. And all these arguments started blowing off right, left, and center. Even in Gone Medieval, the Gone Medieval also started to argue about how this disappeared. So they invited academics on to talk about allegedly the what was it called, the origins of how Greenland was put together. And then suddenly the academics would slide over and say, but what's more important to talk about is how they all disappeared. And then they would start having their own interpretation of how they disappeared. And I highlight the fact that it's their interpretation because they would always follow up with, well, we don't have any solid evidence to support this. And I was like, oh my God, so this is just all a theory to how they disappeared. We don't have a clue how they disappeared. The last one that could solidly prove anything was around 1405. There is a wedding in Greenland, and then the guests jump on their boats and wave goodbye to the wedding, to the people that just had a marriage, and they go back to Norway. And that's the last account we have. And then after that, around 1765, the Norwegians come back and there's no one there. And they're just like, okay, so where's everyone gone?
So so in 1540, there's one more. So Henry Cabot apparently goes to Greenland in 1490 on his way to Newfoundland. He finds no one there. But now we don't, I'm not certain if he actually was in the settlements. He was just in Greenland. But there was only 3 settlements. The first one, the western one, which is actually the northern one, disappeared first, then the central one. And then the eastern one was the last one that was actually occupied by the Europeans. But in 1540, a ship stops there, and they find a body. They actually find a body wearing clothing. Now, here's the thing: Greenland at this point, it's full on little ice age, right? It's cold. So the report doesn't actually go into the deep. They don't know how old the body is because it's so cold that this body could have just been preserved, basically. Yeah. But the body's wearing clothing, and the interesting thing about this body is he looked European. They didn't observe him as being someone of a more Inuit complexion or shape, but which tells us that the body must have been well enough preserved for them to be able to recognize a face. But he's wearing European style woolen garments, but he's also wearing sealskin garments. And apparently he had clutched in his hand, he had a knife, a European style knife that was very, very worn, but that could have been because the metal had rusted away. They don't have high carbon steel in the 16th century in Greenland. So they don't know when he died, but in 1540 there was a fairly well preserved corpse in full clothing there. But that, with the conditions in Greenland, he could have died 100 years before that and just have been there. Yeah. Which we know because they also found, what a lot of people don't know is as temperatures have been warming since the 19th century, things have been melting, things have been coming to the surface. There's been a lot of erosion in Greenland. And so in one of the communities in the churchyard, the soil started wearing away and bodies dressed in clothing started coming to the surface from the graveyard. So back in the early 20th century, they did this massive excavation there, and they found dozens, if not hundreds, of well-preserved garments dating to the 13th to the 15th century when they started doing carbon dating on the clothing. But there's all this debate about, well, why was it abandoned? And I just read I think it's the article I sent you. It's very scientific. It's actually looking at glacial, basically the effects of glaciers on Greenland and on the land in general. And what happens, what some people don't know, is that when you have glaciers that grow, it literally weighs the landmass down. And so the landmass actually sinks into the water. And so the sea levels rise. Yes. And there's apparently I didn't know this until I read this article. There's a gravitational pull from glaciers to water. And so the glacier sinks the landmass down, which puts it closer to the water. The water is pulled towards the glacier. So you get this tidal effect, basically, of the water coming up onto the land. So one of the, and I think this is really realistic because it ties in with the change in the diet of the Greenlanders. as the Middle Ages progressed, they go from eating land mammals to eating increasing amounts of seafood, because the middens show fewer and fewer animal bones and more like seashells and mollusks and whatnot. So that would align with them not being able to farm as much, because the land is getting soaked in salt water, because the land is literally sinking into the ocean, because they're on the edges, right? They're not in the center of the continent. The center of the continent is an ice cap. So they're on the edges. And so there was just the salt, even if it wasn't always flooded, the amount of salt that would have been in the soil would have made the soil unarable. It couldn't have been farmed anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. And on top of that as well, I'm just quickly scanning through the comment section there. Anyway, just getting back to, because there was one point, but I'll get back to yourself there, Rachel. It's very interesting that you bring up the mini ice age and all that stuff that was happening at the time, because Gone Medieval also talked about the mini ice age that was in going into the I suppose the 14th century, where the mini ice age really does start to pick up, and that could explain why there was a disconnection happening going from Greenland to Iceland and then over to Norway, because of the fact that they had to move these ships across. Another interesting point as well that that Gone Medieval had brought up in the last 24 hours is the fact that because we have more connections now, not just up around the Eastern European area over to Moscow, and then Moscow being able to get a hold of ivory up around that area, but also the fact that now up around, what was it called, Constantinople, which is now occupied by the Ottoman Empire, is that the Ottoman Empire had connections going as far as Beijing, and Beijing were also able to get a hold of ivory as well, and then send it across to Constantinople, and from there send it to Venice. So there's this belief as well that Gone Medieval had brought up, is that they were being out-competed by Constantinople, and which was led by what was the Ottoman Empire at the time, and also by Moscow. Moscow was also out competing against
and not just Moscow. So in the 15th century, that's when the Portuguese go, they start going down the coast of Africa. But even before that, we have those trade routes from Western Africa going up into Europe, right? And they're also able to ship ivory. So so with the increasing trade from Africa into Europe as the Middle Ages wears on, there is also, like you said, pressures. There's different sources of ivory now. Greenland no longer has the corner on the market. But also, as I said, there's this theory that at the same time they were running out. They were depleting from overhunting. They were depleting their own resources. And because the walruses are going further and further north, they're just not able to keep pace. Basically.
Because Gone Medieval, the academic they had brought on for that one, he had actually turned around and says, we can prove exactly what you're saying now, Rachel, by the type of ivory that's coming out. It's not large male ivory anymore. It's female small ivory, which shows that they're not only are they being out. So what happens, he believes, the academic that was on Gone Medieval, is that different areas of Europe are suddenly outproducing the amount of ivory that's appearing from the northeast of Europe, right? So to go against that in Greenland, the hunters are trying to hunt more and more and more stuff. And what happens is that, as you said there, these species are suddenly trying to get away from all this, and they're heading up north to get away, and all they're left with is females that can't escape quick enough, and that's what they're suddenly appearing with, that they're wiping out the ivory that is up there.
Yep. And of course, when you start hunting female walruses, that's a bad plan, because that's how new walruses are created. So it's this vicious cycle. But they just weren't able to keep up. Now, Twitchy made a good point. Has made a good statement there, an interesting statement. She said they didn't disappear. The colony just shrank and shrank and shrank until they basically adopted local ways. So there's not a lot of evidence of that.
Yeah.
There's one little bit that I read into genetic evidence. So here's something that's interesting. When they did DNA testing on bodies that they found, Inuit bodies that they found, so Fula and other peoples, and what they found is that many of them had European haploids in their DNA, but it was on the male side. So they had male haploids in their DNA, not female. So that's very interesting because it shows that there was a male contribution to the genetic pool, but not a female one. And that actually aligns with their cases where even because people, maybe we don't necessarily have the best records when it comes to Greenland's history. It's an interesting mixture of records, actual proper government records kept back in Norway and Iceland, but also all these sagas that talk about the settlement of Greenland.
Yeah.
And there's one report of a Thule raiding party that actually successfully not only steals goods from the settlement, the Norse settlement, but they also apparently make away with 2 men and 1 woman.
Oh.
And yeah, and the tendency is that they took them so they don't think they were killed. You wouldn't bother taking someone generally just to kill them, right? You're going to take them and make them part of your community in some useful way. So it's possible that eventually it just shrank until they joined in with the society. But there's another theory, and maybe you heard this one too, that thanks to the massive die-off caused by the Black Death, there were a lot of farms back in Iceland, Norway, Scandinavia, and Europe in general that needed people to work them.
Oh,
so
yeah,
there's one of the theories I read, and it seems pretty plausible, is that word got to them that there were opportunities in places that weren't sinking into the ocean if they wanted to take them, and that weren't as cold. So
it's interesting as well you bring that up, because once again I'm bouncing back over to Gone Medieval as well,
right.
which also said as well is that it's interesting that you bring up the fact that you have people, because of the effects that were happening in Denmark,
Right.
Norway, and Iceland, it was causing more Greenlanders to, not only because of the fact of being outcompeted because of ivory, and
Right.
now there being opportunity inside of these areas because of plague that hit them, but also what they highlight in Gone Medieval is the fact that Greenland became more difficult to live in once they were hit by plague. So places like mainland Europe become easier to live with because there's more opportunities for common peasants to move up the ranks because there's not enough of them, so it means more pay. However, in Greenland, when they're hit by a plague, it suddenly becomes insanely difficult. In places like Greenland, you need more people to survive, or you just don't survive at all. So when there's more and more decrease, especially when they're hit by plagues, it causes life in Greenland to become extremely difficult. And from the evidence that they can find from Greenland, after plagues were hitting all the way up to the 14th century, Greenland suddenly becomes very, very, very difficult to live with every time they're hit by another plague. So it's very interesting that you bring that up, because Gone Medieval, their academics were highlighting that to highlight the fact that Greenland after the 14th century became very difficult to live in.
Yeah. So Twitchy made a comment, and I'd like to correct this, that there were no women at the colony. Oh, no, there were lots of women. There were lots and lots of women. It was supposed to be a full colony. It was a permanent settlement. They built churches. Oh, yeah. No. So medieval, let me set the setting here. So the Norse set up a permanent presence there in 985. And what's interesting about that, and I think you found this interesting too, Philip, it's one of the few cases where Europeans arrive somewhere new to them, and there aren't actually people already there, because there weren't. When the Norse arrived, there were no humans living on Greenland that any evidence shows of. It's one of those interim periods where the last group of humans who had settled had already died off or left for whatever reason, right? So the Norse get there and they set up their colony, and the Thule come in the 12th and the 13th century, right? So they're late comers to the game. what some people call the Inuit, one of the Inuit peoples, right?
Yeah.
So at first they come, they're Norse, and they're, worshiping in the usual Norse religion. But then Christianity arrives, and it takes hold just like it does everywhere else in Europe. And so the church basically kind of manages Greenland via Iceland. So they actually they build a cathedral, and there's a bishop. There are priests. There are churches. They're one of the few buildings that has survived from the Middle Ages is actually a ruin of a church. So it was absolutely intended to be a permanent colony. It was not considered a temporary trading thing. They were building things there. I just listened to a lecture about the wood technology there. They had all kinds of tools and implements. They were carving containers for storing food, really sophisticated containers with proper airtight stoppers. They were actually going to North America and getting wood because they actually found in the Greenland settlement wood from trees that absolutely do not grow in Greenland or in Europe. So it was definitely a permanent colony. And with the graveyard, when they excavated the graveyard and all these clothes they found, lots of women, lots and lots of women. And actually one of the most fascinating things they found amongst all those garments on the bodies, they actually found a woman who was probably buried in the middle of her menstrual cycle. Because she actually has a kind of a belt around her waist, and there's a string going down between her legs, and attached to it is a big piece of moss. And moss is antimicrobial. It's extremely absorbent. It's like the sponge of the land. It's a land sponge, and that would make a fantastic menstrual pad, basically. So there were women there, and that's the kind of weird thing that there doesn't seem to have been interbreeding between, at least not that we can tell in the genetic testing that's been done, between the female Norse and the Inuit. So there were women there, and that's the weird part about it, that's kind of also what leads people to believe that after that wedding in the 15th century, which probably brought news back, right? At that wedding, the people who came said, hey, back in Iceland, we've got farms that need people because, the plague keeps resurging every 10 to 20 years, and we need more bodies. And it could be that the next time a ship came to resupply, people just made the decision, this is too hard, let's go. Let's go to these other opportunities.
Well, it's interesting you should bring up Vinland, right? So Gone Medieval, the academics they had over there had proven that there was tons of interaction happening between Vinland and Greenland at the time. So there is a lot of interaction going on between the two, between the Native Americans of Vinland and the Greenlanders all the way up to the 15th century. So all the way up to the 15th century, America exists, okay? So we have this idea right now where we have, what's it called? The lads going over and they're jumping between, what was it called? Norway
Vinland.
to Greenland,
Yeah.
Norway
to
Iceland, Iceland to Greenland, and then to Finland. And then 1000 AD happens and it stops. It all just stops. Right. The Viking Age ends. We all go off home and it's over. No.
The Viking Age ends. It's over.
Yeah. Okay, lads. Time to pack up. Viking Age is over. This Golden Age is over. Everyone go off home. It's time for bed. Okay. Lights turned off. Click. And the Viking Age is over. Oh, yeah. And that Battle of Hastings. We'll have one big last party and that's it, right? Viking Age is over. Battle of Hastings is finished. Done. Presto. There was nobody. If that was the case, someone forgot to tell Greenland, because Greenland continues to communicate with the Native Americans of Finland all the way up to 1450. And then we have no clue what happens there.
Yeah. And you know how we know that they communicate? Do you know what the evidence for that is? It's real super solid evidence. Do you know what the evidence is? Archaeology. So scattered all, the written sources are always kind of, are they real? Are they not? Right. But the archaeology proves it. So all around, if you look at around Baffin Island and going further and further north into what's now Canada, basically, there are all over there. They have found numbers of medieval Norse objects. In the excavations. They even found a wood carving, but an Inuit wood carving, not carved by the Europeans, an Inuit wood carving that very clearly depicts a European individual wearing a Norse tunic with trim carved into it, very clearly so, and it looks almost exactly like the garments that we found in the graves,
Mm,
right? So there was so much interaction that their art reflected, the Inuit art reflected the interaction with the Norse.
mm.
But they found pieces of chainmail of mail, right? Actually,
Oh.
like, yeah, they actually excavated a piece of mail about this big, riveted mail. By the way, riveted mail, like almost well into the Arctic Circle.
Mm.
So there was absolutely lots of interaction happening, and it's
Right.
numerous pieces. And one of the theories is that the reason we don't find Inuit objects in the Norse settlements is because of what was being traded. The Norse were
Oh, thank you
trading.
so much for that. We
Oh,
just
thank
had a
you, Villa.
donation there. Okay,
Villa,
Viking,
thank
we'll
you.
collect
Love
your.
you. Love
Hi.
you, Villa. Thank you. So the objects, so the Norse were trading their crafts basically, right? All these their high tech things like metal, right? Because they had metallurgy, right? So they actually had metallurgy. So they
Mm,
were trading all of their basically their technology in exchange for food. So they think the theory is that they were getting caribou in exchange for they were getting edible things,
mm, mm, mm.
consumables, in exchange for these more enduring artifacts. So that's why we don't see a reflection of the Inuit culture in the Norse excavations, but we do find the Norse culture in the Inuit excavations. So that's I thought, yeah, that makes sense. If your land is sinking into the ocean and it's getting boggy and salty, so you can't have sheep and cows anymore, or goats, or you can't have that many anymore, and there are no caribou where you live because that's not where they live in Greenland, then you're going to definitely happily accept, these beautiful, big, freshly slaughtered animals in
Mm.
exchange for your art, basically, your crafts.
Yeah. It was Eric the Red. I was trying to remember who it
Eric
was
the
that
Red. Eric the
allegedly.
Red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is with Eric the Red is that his sources come from the saga. So if you know any way of countering the saga, as in turning around and says, "Oh yeah, but they made it all up because because it's a fancy little story," you can kind of
Right.
undermine the whole idea of Eric the Red discovering what was it called, Greenland. And I think from Greenland, then you can argue that Eric the Red had discovered Vinland and all that kind of stuff as well. That's kind of the problem with that. So, and Eric the Red is a funny character as well because Eric the Red,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
Eric.
he is a total social reprobate. He is
Oh my
he
god.
he is he can't stop murdering people.
But I love the fact that you murder somebody and it's just like, oh, Eric, oh, gee, you stop that. Stop
Yeah.
that. Anyone else who
You're,
commits murder is like, he's the most evilest character in all of history. Eric the Red does this. Oh, you stop that, you little rascal. You little
that's right.
rascal. You're so bold. Right.
It's like,
No,
oh, you murdered someone. Well, you're just gonna have to go away for a while. Like,
yeah.
just go. It's just exile. It's fine. It's like, I understand that exile in the Middle Ages, because being kicked out of your community was actually possibly a death sentence,
Yeah.
but not for someone like Eric the Red, right?
Stop.
Not a,
And I love the whole interaction. Oh, you come back here now in 3 months. So he's banned from Norway to start with. He goes over to
yeah,
Iceland. Between the jigs and the reels, something happens over there. And I love how at first he's kind of like, well, I can't go back to Norway because I'm already kind of on the same punishment of exile for 3 months. Because the thing is, they exiled him for like, I think it's 3 months is written down. It's not
yeah,
like for other people, as you were saying there, it's kind of like you're banned for life. And then these
right,
people, these kind of like peasant classes go out into, because this is always meant to work in Ireland, is that if you were of, the equivalent of a clansman, a peasant, and you get exiled, that's you go out into the wilderness and eventually some war band is going to kill you or the elements are going to kill you. But
right,
what's
yeah,
very funny is from the get-go, when Eric the Red is charged, it's kind of like, and you come back here now in 3 months to say sorry. It's not even a case of
right,
taking it seriously. They know he's going to come back. So they exile him for a few months. He sails off to Iceland, where he's just chilling out and stuff, and commits another atrocity.
Yep.
Where once again he's with the same punishment of you come back now in 3 months to apologize. So he tries to go over to Norway with his warband, and he remembers, oh yeah, I can't because I'm exiled. Oopsies, and then starts sailing off the other direction. And
Yep.
what's hilarious about this is later on in the story, they talk about like 50 ships sail off to Greenland and a ton of them disappear. So this was not a safe trip, by the way. But the way the
Right.
saga writes it is like, oh, and so he just turns his boat around and just sails off to Greenland. Like it's an easy little sail to be doing.
It's just a jaunt, man. It's just a jaunt.
That's the way Eric behaves. It's just like, oh well, off I go, off in my boat.
That's right.
So he goes sailing. He just wanders off west on his boat and eventually bumps into Greenland where he discovers it. But if we delve deeper into the Norse sagas, it talks about the fact that people were already previously sailing around Greenland.
Yeah.
So it's not like he discovered it. But what's interesting is when academics were looking at it, they couldn't find that the Romans had discovered it. So the between the Irish and the Norwegians, those fishermen had somewhat discovered it. And on top of that as well, if you want to believe Irish sources, the Irish have been sailing around there since the 6th century with Brendan the Navigator and certain characters like that. But regardless, between fishermen, because I remember talking to Katrina, Professor Katrina from University College of Cork about this. And the very funny thing about the early medieval period is that there's two things that you need to highlight when discovering islands around Ireland and Norway. Is the fact that first off, fishermen would just get lost every once in a while on their boats. And that's how they would like bump into a spot and then come back. Because when you're reading these sources from the 5th century all the way up to the 16th century, it talks about, well, there were fishermen there before. So the fishermen have a fair idea about this. And the other thing to note as well is in the early medieval period, I don't know if, what was it called? There's other people, clearly Norway is doing it. But what the Irish would do is that it was a sin to commit murder. Okay, so that's in the 10 Commandments. So the Irish in the early medieval period was like, well, what happens if we put it into God's hands? So if you're normally what would happen is that they would, what was it called? You would pay a fine. But if you truly were diabolical within your society, that they had to like put you down, right? They were like, okay, so we can't actually put you down because, we'd go to hell, us as a community. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in God's hands. And so they would tie up the person, chuck him on a boat and be like, off in God's hands you go. And the plan is that you would crash into the rocks and then it could be say, well, that was God's, what was it? An act of God. Okay, there you go.
Right. An act of God.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a unique concept. I mean, mainland, in other parts of Europe, they had, trial by ordeal.
Yeah.
Right. It's very interesting how, we'll let, and you wonder how much they believed it, right? Like, how much did they actually believe that, or how much was it winking at each other? It's we'll let God decide it,
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you were supposed to crash off the rocks. But what's funny about that is around 950 AD, I think it's 950 AD, the men of the Inuit, and it's either 950 or 850, somewhere around there. But it's either between the men of Dublin and the men of the Inuit, there's one criminal from Dublin, and they're trying to get rid of him because he's such a troublemaker. So they tie him up and they send him off in the boat, and he goes off in the boat and he crashes into the Isle of Man. And the people of Isle of Man are just like, who's this guy? And between the jigs and the reels, he ends up becoming Bishop of the Isle of Man. And I'm like, how the hell did he pull that off? He's meant to be a criminal.
There are some people who are just so smooth. I mean, that's it. He's a criminal, right? Like, there are some people who are just so smooth and slinky that they can talk themselves out of anything and into anything that they want. Right? It's crazy how many people are like that. But back to the topic of Greenland. So one thing I learned when I was doing my research for this chat today, one thing I learned that I kind of knew from having sailed across the North Atlantic a lot on Queen Mary 2. Did you know that the North Atlantic and the North Pacific have the highest waves on Earth?
Really? No
Yeah,
way.
they've had some of the roughest waters. So that gave me a new perspective of how much I should be respecting these people going out in these not really big ships
Mm,
and plying those waters, where they get these really big waves all the time. And the thing is, if you look at a map and you actually look at how close Iceland, Norway, and Greenland actually are, you
yeah.
think to yourself, well, why weren't they settled there sooner? But then you're like, oh, big waves, small boat, got it.
Mm.
Um, but the other thing is that the closest coast of Greenland. So do you know which coast of Greenland was settled? Which one they chose to settle, the east or the west?
Oh, I'm going to assume it was the West because it's closer to Iceland.
No, the east is closer to Iceland. it
Oh,
was
okay.
it was the east coast of Greenland is closer to Iceland because Greenland is west of Iceland.
Oh, I was thinking about the traders, not the way the water moves. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
Yeah. So they settled on the west coast of Greenland, which is the further coast.
Mm,
But there's a really good reason for that because of the way the prevailing weather conditions work in that part of the world. The east coast of Greenland is just always covered in massive amounts of snow,
mm,
mass amounts of snow, and it has these vicious, violent hurricane speed winds because of the differential in air thickness
yeah.
at the top of the hills versus the air thickness at the bottom of the hills. So the air gets really thick at the top of the hills. And so it rushes down at these crazy hurricane speeds towards the bottom of the hill, which
Mm,
means that it's just a terrible place to be, which is why no one settled there. That's why they went all the way to the West Coast because the West Coast is on the other side of the mountains and it's actually way more mild than it has any right to be based on its latitude. So yeah, they were there. There's a reason that it took them a while to decide to go to Greenland because the part that was closest, she was not nice. She was not
mm.
nice at all.
Ba, ba, ba. Right. I was just very, very quickly
Yeah,
checking the comments over in Instagram.
yeah.
Nothing special over there for the time being. I had a quick look and I was like, okay, I'm not answering that stuff.
Have
Um,
you read the Book of Settlement about Iceland's beginning? Some Irish slaves are in it. I have not myself read the Book of Settlement. I'm familiar with it,
mm,
um, but I haven't actually read it. And since today we were focusing on Greenland, I didn't look so much into Iceland. Iceland itself has a very interesting history, of course, because it actually is one of the first parliaments in Europe, right? The All
mm,
thing.
yeah.
So it's actually, everyone talks about Athens and its democracy, and I'm like, no, let's look at Iceland and
Mm.
their democracy.
Yeah, when it comes down to the whole slavery thing in Ireland, I will have an entire stream bitching about that one because it just annoys the crap out of me because it was a bunch of Gall Gael that had brought up these alleged Irish Vikings, but it's just a complete mess because it's
Right?
more on the
Yeah.
mythology side than it is on factual side because of
Yeah.
the fact that it was settled by Aid the Deep Minded, who was already a part of the Hiberno Scandinavian world, not the Norwegian Norse world, who set up the slave colony in Iceland
Right.
and then connected it to Dublin. And even on top of that, as well, it's also very questionable because actually, this is a topic for this week, actually, over at Medieval Irish History. Just to quickly pop over there, go over to Medieval Irish History. They have a podcast actually talking about this, which was Alex Wolf, Professor Alex Wolf from University of Colorado in America, brings up a very good point that the settlements in Ireland were set up to actually attack France. What was it? England, France, and what was it called? The Iberian Peninsula for slaves, and they had married into the Irish people, especially if you look at the War of the Irish and the Foreigners. It's the men of
Right.
Leinster. People of my family are actually called foreigners. My family is very Irish. And yet, in that book, and he brings up a very good point, is that anybody that was not on the side of the High King of Ireland, Brian Brew, was considered foreigner. You're not Irish. You're not one of us. So
Right.
it was not an ethnic thing. The problem is when you get the words foreigner and Irish from a modern perspective, you're thinking to yourself, oh, these are foreign people ethnically. And that's not the case. And this becomes even more confusing then when we look at the Icelandic sagas and the Greenland sagas. And it's very interesting because going back to this topic now of finding Iceland and Greenland, is the sagas highlight the fact that they go through the family tree of this, and I noticed this as well from an Irish perspective. Is a lot of these people are not
Yeah.
genetically connected to the Irish through slaves; they're genetically connected to the Irish through royal families. So these Vikings in Iceland, Greenland, and Finland will highlight the fact that they're related to Irish princesses. My mother was an Irish princess who was married to these great Irish families. They don't turn around and say, my mother was a slave. Aren't I great? They
Right.
don't do that. But the only example you can find of that is Olaf the Peacock. Olaf the Peacock's mother was an accidental slave. She was accidentally put into the slave trade. Technically speaking, she should have been taken as a hostage, but because of the confusion going on and the fact that she was refusing to talk at the time, that needs to be highlighted in the tale as well. She ends up becoming a slave. But and this needs to be highlighted as well, the moment the Icelanders found out she wasn't a slave, they let her go and gave her own land. Okay, so that also needs to be highlighted, the fact. And on top of that, once again, that's the only example of someone turning around to say, my mother was a slave, but she was technically a princess. And it was kind of technically, an accidental, she was accidentally
She
put as a slave.
an accidental enslaving. How
Yeah,
how very rare is that in history?
yeah.
We didn't mean to. If we'd
Yeah,
known who she was, we wouldn't have.
but that's what they say in the sources and stuff. But what I find funny is that, like, you have Icelanders today and Norwegians going, "We enslaved all the Irish," and it's like, but like, how many of these slaves actually had children that had survived down the generations? Because if you have a legal marriage, you're not legally marrying a slave. Like, you're not going to wake up one day and says, "Huh, let's lower my status by marrying a slave." No, you're going to marry into a royal family, and then you'd highlight that, which the sagas actually do. But it's the same thing as well with the Scottish. Sorry, there.
Well, I was going to say the problem with this, and this is something a lot of people don't understand about sagas. So
Mm.
most of these sagas were not written down at the time when they were first created.
Yeah.
So they were passed on as an oral tradition for centuries
Mm.
until they're finally documented and like written down in the 13th century. And I'm
Mm.
sorry, have any of you played a game of telephone or grapevine, right? So
Mm.
you have like multiple people standing next to each other, and a message starts at one end and it's whispered down the line. And by the time it gets to the last person in the line, it's nothing like the original message. So I don't trust oral history as being uncorruptible. There's some people say, oh well, bards, they know their business and they pass it on perfectly with perfect memorization. And they're like, yes, but bards are creative people, and
Mm.
they will change the story they're singing to please whatever audience is listening. And if it means making it bigger and better with more violence, they will add bigger, better, and more violence. And then that version gets passed on.
Yeah.
So so in the case of the Greenland saga, in the case of the Iceland saga, right, those are all technically works of fiction.
Mm.
So we have to be very careful about, well, how accurate is this? Is this true? Which part of the story is true?
Mm.
And so you can't, that's why we have to compare it against archaeology and against other sorts of records from the era. So there's plenty of room for debate, especially when it comes to Greenland, because of that. Because there are no archives in
Mm.
the medieval settlements of Greenland, right? There's no archives that are actually from Greenland, as far as I know.
Mm.
All records that were kept about Greenland, as far as I understand, are either in Iceland or in Norway.
Yeah.
And there aren't many that date to especially the early days of Greenland, like the settlement. There aren't many that actually date to that time. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt, all these sagas.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Twitchy Witchy highlighting before I get back into talking about slavery going from Iceland to Greenland over to Finland. Fingerland loop braids are an absolute workout, aren't they, Rachel?
They are. Yeah, finger lip braiding is I this is one of my favorite forms of exercise because I get something done while I'm exercising.
Mm,
It, yeah, but it doesn't you don't have to. Like there is certainly a lower impact version that involves sitting down and using your toes or something, but that's boring. Who wants that? No one wants that.
mm, mm, mm. But it is interesting going into Greenland that we don't. I know around 1103 and from that point onwards, slavery is insanely frowned upon.
Yeah,
But before 1103, it seems to be a case of sure, why wouldn't they just pick up a whole load of slaves and bring them over to Greenland? And the thing about that then is that a lot of them would just be freed because a very, very good quote that Jim O'Neill actually brings up is the fact that the only Irish slaves that was I'm aware of were immigrant indigenous servants, but I really don't know. And that's quite interesting because of the fact that inside of the Deep Minded saga, they are referred to as servants and not slaves of
right.
aid. Now, that is interesting in itself because I do believe that they were probably slaves, but they weren't mistreated the way that other people are mistreated by aid to deep minded. That's also interesting as well because when she does get up to Iceland, she automatically has to free all of them because of the fact that there's they all need to get to work, by the way, straight away from the get go. The thing is, the
Yep,
massive jump here is, and we were saying that before, is that it's the moment you get to Iceland and Greenland, it is all hands on deck. These are
yep,
areas that are very, very, very difficult to survive in. So what she does is to get people to populate Iceland is she goes to Dublin because she's an insanely wealthy businesswoman to start with. She didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a wealthy businesswoman. She was already a wealthy businesswoman because she was heavily related to the men of Luckland in the Irish sagas, which is the men of Norway. Okay, so she was already related to them and she had a successful business in Dublin to start with. Now, she lost her business in Dublin, causing her to, because her husband, Olaf the White, had died. So she was no longer safe in Dublin. So that caused her to immigrate up to the Isles just off of Scotland and then make her way up to Iceland. But what she did was very clever. She used a good chunk of her wealth before going out of Dublin to purchase loads of slaves because she had already, obviously, because of the merchants and stuff, had a fair idea of what Iceland was like. So she had a plan from the get go to set up a very successful business. So what
no,
she
wait.
did do,
Did she end up in Greenland? Is this relevant to Greenland?
she goes to Iceland, but the main thing I'm trying to highlight in this is the fact that she gets over to Iceland and then she
Ah,
just frees all the slaves. Okay,
right.
I don't, other than people sailing the boats, I have come across people arguing the fact that slaves would have sailed the boats going from was it Greenland to Finland and then over to Norway. But I'm not, if unless somebody knows the source of it there, I'm not fully
Yeah,
aware of what that source is.
I
From my
haven't. I
knowledge,
haven't. I haven't seen any source that points to that. I
yeah,
mean, all the sources point towards the Norse knowing how to operate their own damn ships.
yeah,
So, the second, with the further and further you get from so-called civilization, from the mass of the population, anyway,
mm,
the harder slavery is to maintain. Um,
yeah,
there are fewer and fewer disincentives for slaves to continue to be slaves, shall we
mm,
say.
yeah,
You just can't maintain those structures without a reasonably large population.
mm,
So, and you definitely, as you say, it's all hands on deck. It's all hands. You need everyone participating at 110% to make a colony in a place like Iceland or, God forbid,
yeah,
Greenland actually thrive. So
yeah,
I didn't see any evidence of slavery in any kind of real way in
yeah.
Greenland.
You see,
And certainly by the Christian era, it's
yeah.
done. There's none of that.
Yeah, and it is a very, very good point to bring up. Okay, that kind of system that you see in Ireland and Norway cannot exist in Iceland, and especially Greenland. Okay, and
Yeah.
this was a huge problem on the news this morning. Is that you have the likes of the president of America and billionaires in America thinking they can just go into Greenland and apply all of their systems into Greenland. And
Yeah.
there were Greenlanders on the news this morning trying to explain that the capitalist system of America is non-existent in Greenland. You cannot, it just doesn't function like that. The reason for it is that it truly is all hands on decks. And when people were trying to explain this legally, like the legal framework of Greenland, people were turning around on the news this morning in the comment section and saying, well, that's communism. And they were like, no, it's not communism. It's a completely different system.
Yeah.
It's just you have to understand in Greenland, you have to be a part of the community. If you're not a
Yep.
part of the community, you just
You
do
won't.
not exist. You'll be
You
wiped
won't
out.
survive. You
Yeah.
will not survive. I mean, to this day, they still have to worry about polar bear attacks.
Yes.
I have a friend. I have a friend who he's American. He was actually working at one of the American bases there in Greenland, and they had at their compound on the base, they had a polar bear get in, and the only thing they could do was go hide in their offices until the polar bear went away. And meanwhile, the polar bear ate one of his coworkers.
Oh my God.
It's not the world that, Greenland is a whole other level.
Oh my God, that is absolutely, because we're having the same problem in Japan right now. When I first arrived, what was it, my second year in Japan, there was a bear that decided he owned that, was a postman. A postman, he decided I owned that postman. A human being, by the way. And every single day until that postman was eventually killed by that bear, the bear would go out there and attack the postman, and the postman would go and hide from the bear, and the bear wouldn't go away because of the fact that he decided the postman is mine now. I own the postman. And bears do that. The moment they decide I own this, you have to give it to them. Just give it to them, because they will hunt. They will continue hunting that until it's theirs, right? And the postman went to the authorities. He said to the authorities every single day, "There's a bear after me," and everybody was just like, "Oh, we don't care." The postman was eventually killed, by the way. This is how ridiculous Japan is. So it is, absolutely true. Because if it was any other country in the world, they'd turn around and say, well,
I don't know. Yeah, why didn't like the wildlife authorities come and take care of the bear? What?
They're overwhelmed in Japan right now. They are overwhelmed, in fairness. But if it was any other country in the world, they would just move him from his job. They were like, "Okay, this is unsafe." Japan is like, "No, you shall work no matter what." When it comes down to work in Japan, oh my God, I could bitch about it all day.
Yeah.
I live in Japan, by the way. I just, it's wild. What was it called? Trump is the bear, is he? He sure is big as one. If he couldn't stop eating burgers. Where else was I going on this? Oh, yes. So in Greenland, you cannot buy and own land. So when a Greenlander goes and buys something, he owns the building itself, but he cannot own the land. And the reason for that is because at any given time, people have to go over and do their business to survive.
Right.
Okay. So even when it comes down to laws, and people are on the news this morning trying to explain this, as in Greenlanders trying to explain this to Americans, and the comments being like, "But that's communism, isn't it?" Like, it's like,
Jesus,
you can't.
Jesus.
Yeah, like more research has to be done into this before you guys start to rush in and try to grab everything. Like,
and apply a label. Like some things, it could be. Hear me out, people. That maybe we don't have a label for this system yet, right? Like, yes, but it's the way that people have been conditioned to fear anything that doesn't involve a hierarchy of the rich people controlling everything is just disgusting. But that definitely was not Greenland. Greenland, from all accounts, Greenland. Yeah, there was in medieval Greenland. There were some people who had some more things than other people, but for the most part, especially based on the clothing that was found on the people in the cemeteries, more or less everyone was kind of on the same level, economically speaking.
Yeah.
And that tracks for what they were dealing with.
Can we jump over to the clothing as well? And the reason
Oh
why I want
yeah,
to jump over to the clothing, and maybe I got confused by this, and you can correct me on this. And I
yeah,
just want to make a slight comment before you can expand further into clothing in Greenland. You
yeah,
were saying before, right? And do
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong about this, that there was a connection clothing wise from Greenland to Ireland, as in an influence going on there up to the 15th century. Is that true, or did I
Oh,
hear you wrong?
no, oh no. So what I said is that Ireland and Greenland are closer,
Okay.
and like geographically closer, and possibly also because of the shipping,
Okay.
depending on how trade routes were going at that time. Ireland and Greenland are closer than Greenland and mainland Europe, right?
Yeah.
Like, it makes more sense to me that the Greenlanders would have clothing that would be closer to the state of technology in Ireland than the state of technology in Germany, for
Yeah.
instance.
That makes
Of
sense.
Right. That's what I don't have evidence. Like, there's no actual evidence. Well, this is clearly an Irish tunic on this person, right? I don't
Yeah.
have anything like that. But just thinking about it logically,
Mm-mm.
that Iceland and Ireland are very close, like
Yeah.
geographically speaking, they're very close. And
Which they are.
those northern ports in Ireland, like Galway, right?
Yes,
Um,
Galway. I
right?
was about to say that about
Yeah,
Galway.
Lake Galway. I bet if I started actually looking, I haven't looked into this and I keep meaning to. If I actually looked into port records or customs accounts, whatever kind of documents have survived from the Middle Ages in those ports, it would I would be very likely, I think, very likely to find evidence of direct connections to Iceland and Greenland.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it.
may,
The
maybe
sources.
not so direct to Greenland, because Greenland had it always, until the 14th century, I think, everything went through Iceland first. So there
Mm,
was like that first filter point. So it'd be harder perhaps to track whether something is from Greenland or going to Greenland, because it would seem like it was going to Iceland or coming from Iceland. But then I think it's in the 13th or the 14th century, the King of Norway says, so everything's going to come directly to Norway. You're not going to stop in Iceland anymore.
mm.
So, but I don't know how that would have impacted, connections with Ireland. Anyway, so my point about that was that the clothing that they have found in Iceland, in terms of tailoring techniques and cut of garments and the kinds of fabrics that are being used, is more likely to share similarities, in my opinion, with what's happening in Ireland than
Mm.
with what's happening in mainland Europe. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, I quickly actually Googled that source. Christopher Columbus. I'm not going to butcher that Spanish saying. I'll just put it into the comment section there of the source from it. But in that source that I just put into the comment section there, it talks about in 1477, when Christopher Columbus was in Galway, he was talking to traders, merchants, and fishermen who said that they went up to areas up around, which is modern day America and stuff, that they went up to, what was it called? Iceland, Greenland, and
Mm,
then up to Finland and stuff. So
right.
it's evidence from that book that there was still movement going on as far as Finland up to 1477, which is very interesting in itself. Because I remember for years, it was tour guides were constantly saying, "Oh well, fishermen were going up around that area of Iceland, up to Greenland, and then up to what we were referring to as Finland and stuff," and that was happening all the way up to 1477. So I posted that source inside there. That was Christopher Columbus who was
Yeah.
interviewing the local. That was Christopher Columbus's account
Oh,
of him
interesting.
talking to merchants and fishermen, and them turning around and saying that they were going up around to Iceland, to Greenland, and then up to quote unquote Vinland, which is Newfoundland, which is interesting in itself because if you go to Newfoundland today,
Okay, wait, Philip, I got to stop you. It's pronounced Newfoundland.
Newfoundland.
Yeah, not
Uh,
Newfoundland, Newfoundland.
Newfoundland. If you go up there today, there's actually people with my sort of accent up around there. So there's more people of kind of a Cork accent and a Galway accent up around that whole region of what is Canada today, which is very, very obviously
Yeah, they have
exciting and stuff.
there are a lot of recent Scottish
Mm,
immigrants to that part. and they still speak with a really heavy brogue. Yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
Mm. So that's absolutely fascinating in itself for sure.
But yeah, did I
Oh yeah,
forget? No,
clothing.
did I send you the pictures of the clothing or not?
Mm,
I no, okay, I downloaded a bunch, and I meant to send them to you in case people wanted visuals. So the garments, there are a lot of reenact. This ties us to reenactment. There are a lot of reenactors who, after there was someone who published this book called, an author, and I forget what her name was. This book called Woven into the Earth, and she basically re-examined all of the Greenland, not all of them, but many of the Greenland garments, and she published a book about how they were constructed, how they were made, and that made that information accessible to a large portion of the reenactment community worldwide. And they took these garments like, oh, look at all these extant garments. Well, this must be how garments in mainland Europe were cut.
mm,
And I'm like, no, 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 not in the 14th and 15th century anyway. So people started using the way these garments were put together to then recreate these super sexy fitted coats and coat adi, the really fitted, like, you remember the mayors of Wexford and Waterford and Limerick, those that's in the Waterford rolls, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's a coat, COTE,
Mm,
right? So they're very fitted, right? But so they started using the tailoring and cutting styles of these garments from Greenland to try to make those garments. But
mm.
here's the problem, Philip. The garments in Greenland are voluminous. They're
Oh,
not fitted. They are not fitted at all. They are super big. They're
okay.
big and they're baggy.
Mm,
So the way that the fabric is put together there isn't to create shape
mm,
and fit, because I think there's only like 2 garments that actually have buttons, and those garments are also voluminous, not
mm.
fitted.
Okay.
So they're just there, in my opinion, they were just maximizing their fabric,
Mm,
right? By putting as many pieces together as possible and cutting it in such a way that absolutely no fabric is wasted.
mm,
It wasn't about creating a fit, because these garments are not fitted. They're very voluminous. They're very big. They're very baggy. And so to use those techniques that are not used to create a fitted garment to then say, well, this is how they're making fashionable garments in the French court. It's like you're taking garments from the ass end of Europe, basically Greenland, right?
mm,
It's the ass end of Europe. It is the last stop on the trading routes. And you're suggesting that this is how we should recreate our fashionable garments from the French court, one of the most sophisticated fashion courts of the 14th century.
mm.
I don't buy that. So I disagree vehemently with anyone who uses those garments to inform how fitted garments in Europe should look, because none of them are fitted. They're all big. They're all baggy.
Mm, 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 mm. That's interesting. All right. And what year is
Yeah.
that? Is that the 15th century, or is that way early on in the early medieval period, or is that throughout?
So you're talking about the garments that they found
Yeah, yeah.
in Greenland. So they're dating. So this is the other interesting thing about the fabric. So it can be they can't really. I don't know if they've carbon dated the bodies or not.
Mm,
But the garments themselves, the fabrics that they tested, range from the 13th to the early 15th century.
mm,
So there's actually some of them show clear signs of having been upcycled,
mm,
where it's probably that fabric maybe started off 200 years before as a big garment, and
mm.
over time the garment wore down and it wore down, and so they kept cutting it smaller and smaller and smaller
Ah,
until come the 15th century, it's nothing but a hat.
mm,
So they're not certain if the dates on that they got from the fabric reflects the date the fabric was woven or the date the garment was made.
mm.
So that's the tricky thing about carbon dating. It doesn't show you the date of manufacture. It shows you the date when the fibers came into being, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a little bit tricky. But you can tell, and it's really interesting if you look at these garments, because in some cases they've displayed them in such a way that you can see their shape. And
Mm,
you actually look at them, you think, wow, that looks more like a 13th century style garment, not like a 14th or a 15th century style garment. So
mm,
some people have theorized that that's because either the garments are just that old and they just kept wearing them, right, from that date, or that the Greenlanders just weren't staying abreast of the latest and greatest in fashion developments because that wasn't their primary concern, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you said, all hands on deck.
Yes,
So
that seems to be the key important thing to remember here. And why we shouldn't rush into Greenland now, huh?
right,
Anyway, what was it
right.
called? I have a very good comment there in the comment section, which is explaining, Rachel, can you
Yes,
explain why you keep moving? What's going on,
yes.
Rachel? What are you doing?
I am having an epileptic seizure. No, I I am doing. Let me see if I can move this further in. I am doing what's called finger loop braiding, and I know when you can barely see that there's yarn around my fingers, but I'm basically, you see, everyone, you can see this lace that is lacing up my dress. I'm
Mm.
making another one of these so that I can have more laces, so that when I inevitably lose this one, I will have another one in my pouch ready to go. So yeah, I'm making more of this. But Philip, there's actually a video of me teaching you to do this. Do you remember that?
Yes, there
When we did
is.
that
There
live
is up on the
stream?
internet. Yeah. So there is finger braiding that we covered before, but we'll probably do more finger braiding because I still have my bits around the place, and my wife is always doing finger braiding around the house for various. Oh, actually, I need to bloody put up that shirt as well. When I was in Nagoya, myself and the wife went over to a medieval. I suppose. Oh God, I can't remember what period it is. It's the period of Oda. I'm not going to even butcher his second name, or the wife will come over and kick me in the head.
What? So
Uh,
you're talking about the end of the Warring States, beginning of the
Yes.
Edo period.
Yeah,
Yeah,
around that kind of period, just the
yeah,
period of
yeah. That
Oda.
that
The
that
finger
transitional
braiding.
period.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one. I have a video of me doing figure braiding of that period, and wow, that's something else with the chair and stuff. I was like, wow, this is. Oh,
Oh yeah.
and
Did they had the little device set up where you use
yeah,
your
yeah,
foot
yeah.
to actually tap it down?
That kind of
Yeah.
weird
There's.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Myself and the wife were doing. I was terrible. I kept butchering it. Right. Yuki's so good at it. She was just like, at first she was like, oh, okay, this is how you do it, and then suddenly I look back at Yuki and she's like, da 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 da, and I'm like, the
And
hell, and
done.
she got way faster than me, yeah, and I'm still there. So when's this come to an end? Like, I have full videos of Yuki just, starting a new one and just suddenly going ba 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 ba, and then just relaxing while I'm just having a panic, just tying myself up in knots and stuff. So I need to put that shirt together and actually post it up. I keep reminding myself to shove that up. I'll do that actually when we finish up the live stream and stuff. That just reminds me. I've got the finished product over there because sometimes I'll quickly actually grab that. Give us 1 second. I'll show you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see this beautiful piece of handcraft. I'm excited. Yeah, for those who don't know, finger loop braiding is not just a European thing. It was practiced in Japan and Korea in the Middle Ages, and the Japanese eventually developed a kind of device to help them make much longer braids, where it was attached to your toe, and you use it. This
Yeah,
device actually beats the pattern down, so you know, this thing that I'm doing, the Japanese don't have to do that.
yeah, I know, right? They were the boys, but they were doing so many. That was the one I did. So that goes onto the armor to tie. I cannot. By the way, I do apologize. I don't specialize in Japanese armor, but the equivalent of it is the shoulder. This shoulder armor here to tie
Right.
that in place.
Yep. Yep.
So that's what I finished doing. So there's a whole of loops and finger braiding that gets done up around the armor and stuff because the Japanese are so tidied and squared away. So they have
They
a ton
are.
of these. And so I did the top right. Well, you can put it on the left or right. It doesn't really matter. And that's the one I finished for that one. So how this should work is that you undo this bit and then you tie up around this bit, which connects to other parts that you finger braid and tie across. So that's the one I have done for
Yeah.
the
So
top shoulder
so
pads.
there's a good comment here, Dad NL, which maybe is Dad Netherlands, not certain, but he comments that he's not a fan of post-colonial thinking that
Mm.
is in vogue nowadays. Although Greenland was originally and should rightfully be owned by native Greenlanders, not the Danes. So that's a bit tricky because who are the original native Greenlanders,
Well, this is what's
right?
causing all the arguments right now, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep.
The problem
Be-
is
because it wasn't the Danes who settled in the Middle Ages either. It was Icelanders/Norwegians, as far as we can tell. So you're right. The Danes who are there now, I would agree, they came in the 18th century. We know that. Um, But it seems that before the Thule, who are kind of there now, it was actually the Norse. So how far back do you trace someone's claim to property, into land? And that's where we start running into real issues.
And the thing is that there was definitely interaction between natives from America and the Norse beforehand as well. But even on top of that, there was also movement of groups happening in the Native American territories as well. So it is a massive argument, and I do highlight the fact that myself and Rachel, before somebody comes in there with big massive quotes and saying, actually, correctly, by law, blah 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 blah. I don't specialize in that stuff. Sorry. Because I didn't realize how not just the origins of it, but as myself and Rachel pointed out, the big argument is how Greenlanders suddenly all disappeared around the 15th century, how they all went kaputu, gone.
Yep.
No one knows. And there's tons and tons of theories to do with that one. And there was a very good comment that we keep bloody ignoring that I need to highlight as well from Zach. Zach, I do apologize. You actually started asking this at the very start, and I kind of wanted to work my way up to it. And then I just forgot all about it. Why did Vikings colonize Iceland and Greenland? Wasn't there enough land? Okay. I think this is always very interesting because, and this is a mistake we keep making, even going into Ukrainian-Russian war, is that people see war and conquest as who has the biggest stick, okay? That's not what it's about. It's about who can get a hold of the resources. So Greenland, huge, absolutely massive. Capturing all of it would, of course, give you the biggest stick. But you're not in Greenland to get the biggest stick. You're in Greenland to get the resource. So you don't even need to colonize, or even, as they would say today, put your companies on Greenland. Okay, so that's the buzzword today. We don't say colonize anymore. We say, my company is in so-and-so place. That's become the modern colonization. But regardless, you don't put your company, or as we would say back then, colonize the whole of Greenland, although it makes your stick really, really big to say I own all of that. You put your colony in one specific place where there's plenty of resources. Now, as myself and Rachel were saying earlier, if the point isn't to have the biggest stick, have as much land as possible, then the point is to get the hold of the ivory. So when allegedly Eric the Red is setting up that area, this is where there's a lot of argument in there, is because the people who were setting up base in Greenland must have been switched on, because where they're setting up is where seal ivory is in there. And it is so important. Walrus. I do apologize again. But it is so important to get a hold of that ivory for Greenland to survive, because with the ivory, they're then able to trade with Vinland first and foremost. And this is actually really important. We think there's no interaction happening. We would naturally assume that there is no interactions between the Native Americans and the people of Greenland, when actually we can clearly see, as Rachel had pointed out early on, is that there is items being traded by the Native Americans and the people of Greenland. So the ivory is very important. The most important thing people of Greenland need from the Native Americans is wood. Why do they need wood? So they can build their houses and build this colony, so they can get more ivory and stay there permanently. Because with the surviving buildings, they have tested it, and most of the material that they're getting, especially wood, is coming from Vinland. It is not native wood of that area of Greenland, okay? So that's very important to start with. Once they've got the colony up and running, and they've got that really healthy connection with their first major trader, which is Vinland, they're then able to trade around over to Iceland and then connect themselves over to Norway. And they become the main traders in that area because of ivory. So Greenland becomes a successful colony all the way up to 1477. And then we have a big, massive argument of, okay, so why did it collapse? Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that ivory is a key material in medieval art and medieval objet d'art. Because a lot of people think art is only painting, or art is only stone sculptures, right? But art is in my opinion, is any handcraft that requires creativity and finesse to create, you know. And so the objects that are being carved out of ivory are in many cases workaday objects, but they're luxury items. So combs, luxury combs are made out of ivory, and into those combs are carved these really intricate scenes, usually courtly love scenes. There's all sorts of book covers that are made of ivory. There's all sorts of little plaques and medallions that are made of ivory. The churches have a lot of intricately carved ivory items as part of their religious regalia and their religious service. So, all of this ivory that's coming from Greenland is fueling that movement in medieval Europe for all of these beautiful ivory carvings. Chests are made out of ivory, beautifully carved caskets, not large ones, small ones, but still. So because of this colony in Greenland, Europe has access to all of this ivory in the earlier Middle Ages, not because, as we said, by the time you're getting into the 14th century, the trade routes are shifting. Suddenly there's ivory coming from other parts of the world that is actually driving the prices down, which means that the Greenlanders therefore have to actually get more ivory, more tusks to make the same amount of money or get the same amount of goods in trade. And that's another one. That's the big economic factor that may have led to the termination of the colony, because they couldn't keep up. They couldn't actually get enough ivory to get the goods they needed to keep surviving on their own out there. And they really do not seem to have adopted. They didn't seem to have adopted any of the practices or ways of the first, the Native Americans, the Inuits who were there. They didn't learn to hunt whales or seals by kayak. They didn't. The graves that we found in the cemetery, I don't recall reading about any sealskin anything. So they weren't wearing the garments. And the thing about sealskin, what I learned also, the garments that, the peoples living in the Arctic Circle generally wear, they wear sealskin, walrus skin, and they're sewn with sinew. Do you know what sinew is?
No, I do not.
Sinew are ligaments and tendons, basically. Sinew is a natural material. All of us land mammals have them. And it's sort of like, we would normally be in something you wouldn't eat because you'd have to cook it for a really long time to make it break down. So it would be a discard item, but someone got the bright idea that you could take sinew, dry it and twist it, and it can become basically a kind of sewing thread that is super strong, super resilient, and when it gets wet, it swells. So if you make a garment out of sealskin and you sew it with sinew, you poke holes in the sealskin, but the first time that garment gets wet, the sinew swells and those holes get plugged and the garment becomes waterproof. So, right? That's how you can have sealskin kayaks and they don't sink.
That's so handy to have, isn't it? Especially during the medieval era.
Would have been, you would have thought that the Europeans would be like, "Ooh, that's real smart. We should do that." But they don't seem to have, based on the evidence. You can't prove a negative. What I'm saying is, except for that one body that was found in 1540, there seems to be no other real evidence of the Norse settlers there adopting the ways of the other peoples who came after them, actually, or the peoples with whom they were interacting on the other side of oh God, what is that body of water? That bay, the bay that separates Greenland from, or the part of the ocean that separates Greenland from all the islands that are kind of now part of Canada.
Oh God, I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you. It's that little corners. It's always those little corners. Trying to remember those names can be quite difficult at time. And I just want to pop over to both my Instagram. So I haven't forgot about you guys on Instagram. Don't you worry. Don't you panic. It's funny because the Instagram comment section, you haven't answered any of my questions. I'm trying to go through all the questions. I'm sorry about that.
Have we been missing stuff? I'm sorry, everyone. So I suspect that I'm getting comments later than other people.
Yeah, on top of that as well, they're not going into the main comment section as well. And sometimes, even with the stuff that's plugged in, doesn't go into the main comment section as well. So I do massively apologize for that, especially If anybody had donated, I don't think there's any donations that had gone through that didn't pop up. I've actually had that before, where a donation went through but didn't pop up in the main comment section. So if that ever happens, I do massively apologize for that, but I don't think that's happened so far.
Yeah. Well, while you look through the comments, I'm just going to observe. Yes. So there is a comment about ivory now. You need certification that it's before 1948. Yeah. Otherwise, it's illegal. Yeah, because ivory these days, new ivory in quotes, is obtained in highly unethical ways, and should not be. Yeah, because the people who hunt ivory now, they literally will kill an elephant, take
Yeah.
their tusks, and do nothing with the rest of the elephant just for their
Yeah,
tusks. It's so
I had to deal
horrifying.
with that. Yeah, I seen
Ugh,
that with my own eyes when I was in Kenya with the military.
ugh,
You'd see, oh, there were nasty feckers. The Kenyan rangers were hunting them all the time. I was on a stag position one night while everybody else was asleep with a ranger, a Kenyan ranger, and it was so funny because I was on with him, and then suddenly he got up and he was like, "I'll be back in a second." He ran into the distance to go and catch it. He saw a poacher in the background and he ran into the distance, caught him, arrested him, and ordered the police to
Jesus.
come in and pick him up. Sharp fella, like, but at the time I was like, oh, what the hell? He just stood up. I was only 21 years of age at the time, and he just ran out into the distance. I had no clue what was going on, just looking around at me. But yeah, mad stuff. Just popping into the comments over on Instagram as well, asking why wouldn't people go after the land itself in Greenland? What's wrong with the land? Why wouldn't they focus on the lands in Greenland?
Because it's covered in ice.
Mm,
It's covered in a massive ice sheet. And the east side of Greenland is brutal weather-wise. I mean, gruesomely brutal.
mm,
Think of like a snow hurricane, and I think
yeah,
that would probably conjure it best. It's cold, there's crap tons of snow, and there's really high winds. It's not something medieval people would have wanted to deal with. And the thing is, what can you get from ice, right? What an
mm,
ice cap? That's not there's you can't. They did not have the technology to mine under ice caps,
yeah.
so it wouldn't matter what minerals might be hiding under those ice caps. They were not accessible or known about. So the ivory is it. The land is the land. If the land can't actually be settled, and most of it couldn't because it was
Mm,
covered in ice caps,
yeah.
then it's not. It doesn't matter how big the pile of land is if 95% of it is unsettleable.
How did this is what I find very, very interesting as well, and I didn't realize how interesting this topic was until I came to Japan and listening to the really terrifying stories of how medieval Japanese people dealt with bears in the north of Japan in Hokkaido is a very,
Right.
very it's such a deep story in itself. Um, Not something I know too much about is how did Greenlanders, settlers, handle polar bears in Greenland? That seems like a very interesting one as well. You were saying earlier, Rachel, about how the Americans were dealing with it by just going
Yeah,
into their buildings and hiding. I assume
hiding.
that's what Greenlanders were doing as well.
So I'll be honest, I have not read of any accounts
Mm,
discussing polar bears. There are accounts discussing the Skraelings,
yeah.
but those are in the sagas, right? So the Skraelings is the Norse word for the non-Europeans in
Mm,
that part of the world. So for the Inuit, they're called Skraelingar. But I haven't heard about any polar bear interactions. It could be that they were too far south for polar bears.
yeah.
Uh, Polar bears tend to be further north. um, yeah, it could be. For all I know, it could be that there weren't polar bears where they were.
Mm,
On the other hand, the further north they go, the more likely it is that they would have encountered polar bears. And actually, that reminds me of one of the archaeological finds up in the northern, like the very northern part of Greenland, where it becomes an archipelago of islands that kind of all blend into what's now Canada.
mm,
They actually found up in that part of the world, they found remnants of a Norse ship.
yeah.
Specifically, they apparently found the rivets, and they think they think that is a sign of a hunting expedition that did not return.
Mm.
And it could be that they encountered a polar bear, and that's all she wrote.
Oh,
Um, I think that a medieval person encountering a polar bear or even a small group of medieval people encountering a polar bear, I don't think they've got a shot in hell.
Yeah.
I don't think they've got a shot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, have any of you seen a polar bear stand up and get angry? The claws and the size, and there's all this fur, and their skin is really good at defending against being pierced. So I think probably any encounters were terminal and they didn't come back. And that might be another reason that the colony ultimately vanished, why it ceased to be, is because they kept having to go further and further north for the walrus, Jesus, the walrus ivory. And so they were increasingly not coming back.
Yeah.
That could be something that happened as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fact. But the thing is, right, I'm fascinated about hunting bears in both Japan and America. It's still even with modern weaponry such as rifles and assault rifles and shotguns, bears, they're very, very switchy. When it comes down to, I can't highlight enough, bears are insanely intelligent. I've watched
Very
bear
smart.
hunts, and they will
Very
flank
smart.
you. So the moment they decide, right, you're my property, I am hunting you because you are meat that belongs to me. I'm going to bring you back to my cave and keep you alive, and ration you through the winter and eat you slowly. Once they've
Yep.
decided they're doing that, they're very tactically switched on. So you decide, okay, I'm going to go hunt that bear. You get into a fight with that bear, you escape the bear, right? Because things have gone wrong. The bear then knows you're in the forest, right? It will then pick up your smell. The smell does
Yep.
not go away, right? So the bear does not, and this is what gets really freaky about both bears and salt alligators. Both bears and salt alligators can think tactically, right? So most animals do not think tactically, and they will come directly at you.
Yep.
Not salt alligators and bears. They will try find ways to flank and trick you. So they will
Yep.
decide, here's one for you. If I go directly onto the path and directly go at you, you'll shoot me dead. So I'll do is I'll hide and creep in the forest, and at the last moment, I will flank and attack you. Bears literally think like that. I've seen videos online of Americans going through the forest with
Yep.
shotguns, and then suddenly the bear comes up, and by a sheer lucky, insane luck on their part, they manage to get at the last second a shotgun to the head of the bear, so they can record it and bring it back to YouTube to show how close they got to death. They don't have to in Japan. You legally cannot have those type of shotguns. I don't know. This is why it's so difficult hunting in Japan, because the fact that these bears are
Yeah.
insanely switched on, and you can only use legal rifles. It is insane. Bears, even today, very, very difficult. That's why when it comes down to reading the stories from the medieval period from Japan about hunting bears, they're just insanely amazing. That's also why, what was it called? So many people in the medieval period would put, a bear cap on their head of a bear and stuff, just to kind of highlight and show off, I'm a great hunter, aren't I?
Right.
Because hunting bears, we kind of act like today everybody was walking around with bear skin on them. No way,
No.
Bear skin was not a part of, as Rachel has clearly ranted a good few times about it. People were not just casually walking around with wolf and bear skins on them, because of the fact that these things were insanely difficult to catch.
And it was just the medieval mind, wearing fur on the outside, like showing the fur, like big, especially big woolly fur. That's what barbarians did. That's what wild men did. Civilized men didn't do that. Civilized men wore fur on the inside of their garments, and the fur was very carefully, cleverly sewn. And if there was fur trim showing, then it was very beautifully put together and trimmed in such a way that it looked like it was velvet, right? So being furry, being a furry in the Middle Ages meant you were a wild man. You were not a member of civilized society. So, and the Vikings too. The Vikings loved their silk. They loved their jewelry. They loved their luxury wools, right? They loved nice, bright, beautiful clothing with full skirts. By the way, men, tunics. The original Vikings wore tunics with nice full skirts in them, not not leather shirts tucked into leather trousers with a belt and dreadlocks.
Mm, 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 mm. Aye, for sure. The comment section turning into who has the biggest stick. I've
Who has
got the
the
biggest
biggest stick?
stick. I've hunted the
Oh my
biggest
God.
bear.
So here's the question was, if you're an American in Greenland, why don't you just use your AK-47 or your AR-15 to
Mm,
take the bear out? Because if you're an American in Greenland, you don't have that gun.
yeah.
And you definitely don't have that kind of gun on a military installation. People have this weird idea about American military installations and everyone walking around armed to the teeth with firearms.
Mm,
No, no, we have armories where those things are stored under
yeah.
lock and key. You don't
Mm.
just carry. No, I think officers might be allowed to carry a sidearm, but usually not. Usually you don't just get. No, that's not how. Philip, in the Irish Army, were you just allowed to just carry around an assault rifle just as part of your uniform on a day-to-day basis?
So what happened is that that used to be a case all the way up to the 1970s, and then people got a bit.
Right.
It was a mixture of lads getting annoyed at their officer and going "Bye bye, officer," which is also seen in the movie Full Metal Jacket, right? So very good example of why rifles were taken away by soldiers. And the second one being is that someday, somebody's just like, "Well, I'm kind of sick of life because the army, is hard." And then decide I'm going to put this into my mouth and say goodnight. So
Right.
between a mixture of this and that, they
Yeah.
decided in the Irish military and the British military, okay, anytime, okay, unless they're actually doing their job, which is the military job itself of patrolling or doing any
Right.
form of peacekeeping, right, quote unquote peacekeeping, we're going to take their rifles off of them. They don't need their rifles when they're walking up and down a camp, right, which is
Yeah.
secured by soldiers on the gates. So the soldiers on the
Yeah.
gates have rifles to defend
They do. That is correct.
camp. But once you get inside the camp, the rifles are taken off them, so they can
Yeah.
decide not to shoot their own officers and also put a gun to their head. So they took all that off of them in the 1970s. I'm not sure when that happened in the American military.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I do know that as long as Ryan has been active duty,
Yeah.
which is 20 years,
Mm,
uh, not.
yeah.
So my friend who was he was not a military, he was a civilian employee. He was a U.S. federal government employee in Greenland at an American facility a military facility in Greenland. They definitely don't have firearms, but none of them had firearms because you're on base, right?
Yeah.
But polar bears don't respect fences, and they they
Yes.
they they don't respect gates, and they're big and they're fast and they're wily. So yeah, none of them had a gun. I don't know why they didn't give them. I don't even know what they could have given them to be anti-polar bear deterrent, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
remember that as well. Is that in Afghan lads were having the Marines again? It's funny you turn around and says the Marines. Yeah, I do remember
Yeah,
that
but
in
but I
Afghanistan as
yeah.
well. Is that the Marines were
Well,
having
sure,
showers with their rifles
sure,
on?
sure, but not
Yeah,
your average military base. Like if you're downrange in a war zone, it's a different conversation we're
yeah,
having, right?
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, back
But
to Greenland, back to medieval Greenland. Yeah, back to medieval Greenland. So
yes,
there was a comment about where people could read more about this. So one of my favorite websites for freely accessible academic peer-reviewed, sometimes peer-reviewed, actually not necessarily peer-reviewed, but generally a range of very good academic papers for
mm,
free is academia.edu, academia.edu. Right?
mm,
It's freely accessible, and there is a huge array of papers published on every kind of topic, not just history,
mm,
science, philosophy, all linguistics, every topic you can imagine, and anyone can publish their paper there. So there's a range of papers there by some amateurs like me, technically an amateur, I don't have my PhD, right? But who have been doing really in-depth and high quality, high caliber research. They'll publish their papers there as well. So if you're
mm.
interested in reading more on Greenland, I really recommend, and you want something that's free and you don't have, it's not behind a paywall, academia.edu is a great resource. Also, medievalist.net. If you go to their website and you do a search for Greenland, you're going to get the most. I shared Philip some of the screenshots after I did the search. You'll get
Yeah.
some of the most interesting headlines which are very contradictory. Especially, you can tell just by if you do a search for Greenland on medievalist.net, all of the results are like, why the new research shows that the Greenland settlement disappeared because of, and then it's drought, it's too cold, it's too warm, it's too wet. Like paper after paper, each kind of coming to a different conclusion about why the settlement died. But Philip,
Yeah.
I think, have you heard the parable of the elephant and the seven blind men?
No, I haven't. Explain.
So this is a metaphor for religion,
Mm.
and our lack of understanding of not just religion, of understanding of God, the nature of God, right? So seven blind men are shown led to an elephant, and they're told to touch it and determine and tell us what the elephant looks like, right, based on their hands. But
Mm.
they're all at different parts of the elephant. So the blind man who's touching the trunk says, "Oh, it's like a snake." The man who is touching the leg says, "Oh, it's like a tree trunk," right? And
Mm.
so on and so forth. The point being that none of us can see the whole picture
Yeah.
because we're all blind in some way. So I think the disappearance of Greenland, or the termination of the medieval settlement in Greenland, is very much like that.
Yeah.
It's not one thing. It isn't a single thing that brought it to an end. I don't think a meteor struck it and everyone died. I don't think plague came through and everyone died.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of factors that just eventually made it not viable.
Mm. Yeah, looking at all the evidence in the last 24 hours, and I didn't realize so much information was out there. Like I assumed straight away that the main argument would be, especially this week, around the origins of Greenland. And I was completely shocked when so many academics started to appear arguing this argument that has seems to have gone on for the last since 1759 of where the hell did they just disappear to?
Yeah.
And that seems to be the most important argument of all, according to academics over in God Medieval. And as you highlighted as well, medievalist.net, that highlighted a whole load of other
Yeah.
academic arguments that are ready to appear. So I definitely would advise, definitely head over to Gone Medieval, listen to their podcasts from this week, going on about this argument of both the origins of Greenland and the alleged even more important argument: what happened to Greenland? Where did everybody go after the
Yeah.
16th
There's
century? Where did they
it,
disappear to?
it's really, it's really fascinating, is very few academics seem to have focused on what life was like in the Greenland
Yeah.
settlements. They're like, they're all focused. It's all about the apocalypse, right? It's all about the end of
Mm,
times.
yeah.
About how did it's all about the mystery. It's like, but we know there's so much archaeology that's been done there now that
Mm,
has shown so many objects of daily life. I'm telling you, I found one 25-minute presentation by I think he's Icelandic, by an
yeah.
Icelandic gentleman talking about the wooden containers that were
Oh,
excavated, like for
yeah.
food, like, wooden containers that were used to store foodstuffs, and
Yeah.
how they were constructed and how sophisticated they were, and how many of them were decorated, some of them with Christian symbolism, and also, like the usual Ave Maria, and, the various Latin phrases and abbreviations that are related to Christianity and Christian worship, and
Mm,
how some of them had stoppers and were actually airtight. Like this whole 25-minute presentation where he doesn't say anything about how the colony disappeared.
mm,
But
mm.
if you just kind of go based on the headlines, you would think that all people care about is how it came to an end, not what happened while it was still around.
Yeah, and that's definitely a discussion that we'll have to have this weekend on what you guys will have on your Saturday night. So
Yeah.
myself and Rachel will definitely continue having this conversation for sure. Before we start finishing up, Rachel, is there anything else you'd love to add in with the medieval news, or are you happy to start concluding there?
No, I think that's I've been focusing hard on Greenland, because now that it's in the crosshairs.
Yeah,
So unfortunately, maybe literally, fuck.
yeah, I know,
Um,
right?
now that it's in the crosshairs, I wanted to brush up on the latest research, because what do we always say, Philip? History is not set in stone. So
Especially this, by the looks of it.
this, especially this,
Maybe it's set in ice.
It's like, is it? Is it though?
Yeah, it
The
feels like
ice
it's
is
melting away.
melting.
I don't
The
know,
ice
but
is
maybe quite
melting.
literally, like, But we'll see. We'll see.
So I was very interested to see what the latest thoughts and research are. And, I think that really we need to stop, we as historians need to stop viewing history as just history. We need to start working with people from other fields, like climatologists, like
Yeah.
glacial experts, like marine biologists, right? And examining the evidence all together so that we can really get a full picture. Because like the human body is not just organs living in separation,
Mm,
it's all interconnected. And so to understand when the system goes wrong, you have to understand all the things that affect the system. Yeah.
mm. For sure. Anyway, regardless, we'll start finishing up there before you guys get too excited. Rachel, if we
Yes.
love your work, how is the best, especially your clothing and all that stuff, what's the best way to support your work?
Oh, yeah. First off, thank you for all the super chatters out there. Philip and I really appreciate your willingness to give us your money while we talk about this sort of stuff. Yeah, I have a patron on Patreon, the
Mm,
Creative Contessa, and of course on my YouTube channel. I have channel membership, and those all come with a host of extra perks, hours and hours and hours of extra footage, full tutorials, and I have a Creative Contessa Discord server where
mm,
we talk about things, we share more resources, we share our progress reports. I give advice when people post a picture of something they're working on and they're like, I can't make this work, help me. I provide advice. We have live chats together where we actually like interact face to face and talk with our
mm.
voices. So yeah, if you're interested in supporting my work and helping me get more of interesting, history and research on medieval material culture, clothing, dance, food, all of it, you can do it that way. Philip, what about you? What do you have going on over there on your Patreon these days?
Right. First and foremost, the most important thing between the two of us is definitely the fundraiser we're doing right now on help recreate 15th century ensemble. Okay. So this one is a pretty rare one. All right. Nobody else has done this before, which is trying to put together Desmond Fitzgerald's clothing. Okay. So
Yeah.
the Irish Lord of Ireland, 15th century Desmond. Yes, the one that would go on, the family that would go on and fight the English in the, what was it called, 16th century, Desmond Rebellion,
Yep.
fight against the Tudors themselves. That Pacific family, nobody has put together their ensemble from the 15th century when they were in a sort of a golden age going on there, especially with all the trade routes and stuff. And
Yep.
so if you want to support that work, definitely head on over to GoFundMe. And under that, it is help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble.
Yep, we're
Rachel
really
has
we're
done.
really we're really excited about it, guys.
Mm,
So if y'all are tired of seeing Philip in that T-shirt,
it's a
or
great
other
T-shirt.
other or not any T-shirt generic, and you'd like to see him in medieval clothes like I am for our live streams, this is the project. We're trying to
Yes.
get Philip kitted up so he can look dapper and sexy as well. So
Oh,
if you want to see him in 15th century Irish splendor,
mm.
then yeah, GoFundMe. What did I call it again? Help us make a 15th century
It
Irish ensemble.
is
Yeah,
just go into GoFundMe and is under help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble. Okay.
yeah,
Just pop in there if you want to support that work, or even just go in there and have an old nosy to see what's going on there right now. But
yeah,
regardless, guys, and also thank everybody who's been funding us so far. That means so much
yeah,
to us. Also, on top of that as well, this Sunday I'll be covering topics over on my own Patreon for about 20 quid a month. I'll be covering classes on there every Sunday night, 9 o'clock Irish time. I've got the times actually here as well. If we zoom in a wee bit, there we go. So right now, because of the change of the times, because of the light and stuff, that's going to be 9 p.m. Irish time, 4 p.m. Boston and New York time, 1 p.m. California time, and 7 a.m. Australia time. That's the classes right there. That's over on my Patreon, 20 quid a month, just 20 quid a month, and I can get you those classes every Sunday, unless you're living over in Australia, where that is on the Monday morning. Okay, guys, this week we're covering the Gaelic in the 13th century. That is the O'Connors and the de Burghs fighting each other over the territories in the west of Ireland, okay, the Connacht region. So if you're interested in that, and also just interested in Irish medieval history in general, we do classes every Sunday night, okay? So definitely head there. Or if you just want to support my Patreon, there's a dozen ways to do that as well. So just have an old nosy anyway. Head on over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History and have an old nosy for yourself.
Yep.
Also, you can just subscribe to the YouTube in general. I think there's a subscription here somewhere, right? So you can support myself and Rachel that way as well. So any donations to the two of us means so much to us. That's basically finances going into doing all the research into all of our books, the classes that we're doing, and also all the clothing as well that Rachel makes. And also, don't forget, the main project that I personally want Rachel to do is help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble on GoFundMe. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for all the support, and Slán go Bye. See you.
Stay creative, everyone. Until next
Bye.
time.